The whole delay was my fault. I finished my presentation 17 minutes ago, and some kind of compatibility problem that was all my fault. Thank you again for coming here, everybody who stayed. So I think analytics is the new vendor war, and hopefully I can kind of prove that. And what I mean by vendor war is the Wi-Fi vendors, many of which are in this room, when it comes to making a purchasing decision, when someone says, hey, I'm going to purchase your product, I think a lot of customers are saying, what can you do for me? And we'll talk about that coming up. I realized, now my clicker is not working. Uh-oh. Okay, I felt buzzing. Come on, baby. It's all right, so I'll do a little improv here for a second. So the first slide is, I realized, and I kind of saw a show of hands, that a lot of people are fairly new, at least to this conference. So I thought it'd be important to do a bio for me. So I've been doing Wi-Fi. I started in 2001 with a wireless ISP. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, like graduating class of 12, 60 miles to high school. Like, yeah, that's all real stories. And so started a wireless ISP kind of after high school to try to get internet out to this middle of nowhere place. It's kind of, you can brag and say, I covered 1,000 square miles with Wi-Fi, which is actually true. I mean, not with your phone, but with house CPE equipment. But I started learning about antennas and things like that then, because I would call up and order an antenna and the guy would say, hey, do you want that in DBI or DBD? And I was like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. But that was kind of my start in Wi-Fi. In late, 2005, I was told I could make a bunch of money in Wi-Fi training. So I thought, hey, I know something about that. Got a bunch of certifications. Ended up emailing this guy named Devin Aiken a bunch because the book didn't match the standards, and he didn't like me much, but we love each other now. What else? Started working for an actual vendor, Ruckus Wireless, in 2009. Left a couple years ago and started with this new startup that I'm with called Nyansa. It's the worst name for a vendor ever. But we do some pretty interesting things there. So, background on Nyansa is, man, the slides were really good, I promise. Still no. Is it click? No clicky. Really? Man, I have SADs. Okay, so we can just go to just animate through. I have like a ton of animations in here, so this is going to go really badly. So we can just go to the next slide, animate that out. So Nyansa, basically the idea behind Nyansa is wired and wireless network analytics. It's vendor neutral, meaning we support multiple vendors in the Wi-Fi space, but that's kind of, I work for a Wi-Fi vendor, now into analytics, so it's kind of this merging of kind of what I see happening here today. So we can go to the next slide. So a lot of customers don't let us show their logos, but on a completely unrelated note, I have some favorite things. I live in Arkansas. I like the Arkansas Razorbacks. I like shopping at Walmart. I'm a big fan of Tesla, the company. I'm doing a home renovation project, so I like Home Depot. I go there often. And I like the Atlanta Braves. So those are some of my favorite things. I'd like to learn more about you later if we can. So what are we talking about here? The new vendor war. So we'll go ahead and go and just talk about that war here. No, go ahead. Do it. You guys were rocking it. So the new vendor war. First, it started out kind of the way I see it is early on, people were just like, okay, this is the devil. Right? We can't really trust wireless anyway. But then the battles ensued. That when Wi-Fi became something The way I saw it, and I think a number of people did too, is Wi-Fi vendors started coming along to solve problems. Aruba came out and said, hey, look, Wi-Fi is terribly unsecure, and they were right. So Aruba provided some really good security solutions at the time. Voice over IP roaming was really bad, so Maru did something. Now that they're effectively dead, I can say it was horrible. I don't know why they did that. And then it was a speed race. So you have different vendors who really approached it in many different ways. Aerohive said, hey, look, this whole controller thing is ridiculous. It's a bottleneck. Ruckus was a big fan of doing the whole fancy antenna thing. Xeris was like, the more radios in a box, the better. But the whole idea was a speed race. And then the shift that I see happening there was, give me something that works, and if it has cloud in the word, that's awesome. And Meraki dominated that. Meraki was the first company that I really saw that really pushed the envelope and said, hey, cloud management is awesome. They did a great job. They got bought for $1.2 billion, so you can't really argue their success there. But now we're here. 2018 comes along, and it's about information. I had to change my slide to say information, not data, because we all think about data as data rate. APIs for extra credit, and hey, let me analyze that data. And I look at Mist as that. I mean, Mist has been around way before 2018, but then I look at today is that war, and you saw presentations from Bob Friday talking about analytics and AI, and I think that is the new war from the vendor's perspective. So what is analytics? So I stole it right from Wikipedia, the number one source for correct information on the internet. And it's the discovery, interpretation, and communication of meaningful patterns in data. One of the problems with being in this industry like I am, where my career, is that it's every buzzword that exists, we do. Big data, analytics, cloud, every buzzword I have to say. But what is not analytics? It's not machine learning, and it's not artificial intelligence. Those are actually separate topics, not unrelated. They're very related topics, but for the purpose of this discussion is I don't want you to think that machine learning, to do analytics, that you have to have machine learning. And we're going to use some examples to define those things here in a moment. Okay, don't overclick here, right? This is a timing thing, right? Comedy is timing. You guys ready for this? How many of you have ever heard of Godwin's law? Before you just read it up here. A few of you up here. If you participate in internet forums, how many of you are on Reddit? You guys need to spend more time on Reddit. It's a really good waste of time. But it's like the best waste of time on the internet. Second to YouTube. So Godwin's law basically is talking about internet discussions, how internet discussions always end up, if there's an argument at all, it always ends up talking about Hitler and the Nazis. Somehow there's always a comparison made, and this lawyer guy on the internet realized this. Now it's called Godwin's law. There's another law called Boardman's law. Robert Boardman's law, any presentation by myself, regardless of length, will always mention my missile silo and my guns. It's all I have. Next. What's that? I am going to talk about my guns. Hold on. Robert, I can't see you back there. Guns, get that? Theoretically. So this is data. Part of the reason this is a public service announcement. How many of you have ever thought you want to make money on YouTube? Okay, if you've ever thought, hey, this may be a good way to make a couple dollars, I want you to look very closely at this slide. I don't think we can publish this because YouTube says I can't. But if you look very closely, you're going to see some interesting things. So I have a YouTube channel. It's called Death Wears Bunny Slippers. It's all about the missile silo. Told you I couldn't talk about it. Couldn't go without talking about it. But if you look at the analytics, about 17 million minutes of people watching those videos. It's a huge number. 17 million minutes, about 50,000 subscribers, 4 some odd million views, and that equals $4,000. It is not even close to paying for the camera or the drone that I use. So YouTube is not that great way to make money. Again, that's the public service announcement. But for topical sense, this is data. What you do with this data is analytics. So the data on the chart here doesn't really mean anything, but if you look at the data, it says that if I'm going to have an advertiser on my site, that I need to focus on men age 24 to 37, because men are 98.2% of my watch audience, rightfully so, and that demographic. So using that data to do something positive is analytics. In this case, though, it's interpreted by me, a human. YouTube doesn't call me and say, hey, GT, here's a person you should advertise to. That, if it did it automatically, maybe machine learning or maybe AI. One of the things I see trending in the industry, so Jeff Hadel is here with me, and he and I do a lot of trade shows together. Especially when we started, people didn't say analytics much. And that's all vendors, right? So we went to Cisco Live. We still go to Cisco Live every year. And the number of booths that say they do analytics has increased significantly. But graphs do not necessarily equal analytics. So don't get those things confused. Remember, we're not going to go back PowerPoint-wise, but going back to the definitions of analytics, it's using the data, finding patterns in data, to try to come up with some sort of an answer to a problem. Now, cool analytics will give you an answer to a problem that you're asking. Badass analytics will give you an answer to a problem you're not asking. It'll actually proactively be like, hey, here's something to think about. So these 4 items I have up here are kind of random. But those individually, if I were to show you a graph of each of those things, those individually are not all that exciting. But if then all of a sudden you see signal strength, which is important, and then you see roam time. If I told you that a roam time was 0.1 second, what is that, 100 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds, let's say 20 milliseconds. Is that a good roam? Was that a successful roam? You guys can speak. Now. Yes, no? How many of you took a test this week? You have to be more definitive about your answers, right? For those of you that are certified, people are now relying on you to speak and give good answers. So is a 10 or 20 millisecond roam good? It's great. But there's a second piece to this puzzle. What did TCP/IP do? What did the TCP layer do? What did layer 4 do when the roam occurred? That's data correlation. Now that's interesting. Because I was pulling up customer data earlier, and I saw a roam that from layer 2 Wi-Fi was a rock star. But then right next to it, our software, again pimping us a little bit here, says, hey, this was a failed roam because TCP broke. There was 4 TCP reset packets for applications after the roam took place. That's where analytics starts to get cool, is taking this data to tell a story. I'm going to start, I just need a, there we go. That was nice. So I'm starting thinking about the challenges, and I have a slide up here that's called challenges here in a few minutes, but it's about data. Again, I don't like using the word big data because it feels like I'm in marketing, which I completely detest. That's all I've ever been in technologies marketing. But so big data is about processing lots of data. If you saw the first slide, we kind of had to click through it. But at Nyansa, we've processed about 330 or so, I think, Jeff, 330 petabytes of data. We're a startup. 330 petabytes of data have been processed by our system. That's a lot. That's like 330,000 terabytes, I think, right? If I do my math right. So you have to have lots of data. The more data you have, the better. When I first started, we weren't even public yet. Our CTO, who's spoken here before, has said, hey, look, just get us customers. They don't have to pay because we want more data. We need to be able to get better stories. We're not doing that for free anymore, so sorry about that. Velocity. Get the speed, handling the speed of the data. Again, with the number of customers that we have now, I mean, we have high aspirations of being much larger, but right now, again, we're dealing with lots and lots of data very quickly. And then many different types of data. What data do we want? What data should any vendor want? Again, any Wi-Fi vendor in the room, if they're going to do analytics, They have to look at way more than the Wi-Fi. I was very privileged to be able to talk to Bob Friday outside the other day, and he was saying, well, what data should we ingest? And my answer is always everything. Anything that you can throw into a system, things like NetFlow, right? Do Wi-Fi people care about NetFlow? You probably shouldn't on the surface, but how many of you have ever been blamed? That's a good question. How many of you Wi-Fi people have ever had Wi-Fi blamed when it wasn't a Wi-Fi problem? Those of you that are not raising your hands have never actually worked in Wi-Fi, ever. You will be blamed, right? It's just part of it. That's just, the way it is. Wi-Fi is super easy to blame. So the goal of any good analytics software is to place blame properly. Point the finger to the right person and have data to back it up. One of the problems I see here is this whole bottom point, which is not all vendors have or allow access to great data. I don't know if I won't throw anybody under the bus, maybe ever or quite yet. We have had vendors that we couldn't integrate with because they don't have good data coming out of their radios. And what I mean by that is, if somebody's connected to it, can I extract Keith's RSSI? Can I extract his MCS? Can you tell me about his experience on your access point? Some vendors don't have that. But it's changing. The vendors that I'm actually thinking of right now are fast at work making those changes. Just like 7 years ago, 10 years ago, those same vendors were making fast changes to add cloud because Meraki just got bought for $1.2 billion, so cloud seems like a really good thing to do. So that's kind of how this is happening. Again, we're at that point today. So here's a test. I was actually supposed to, not you guys, it was me. I missed an animation here. So if you look at this, think about this as kind of in 3 sections. Here's your test. Your access point has 75% channel utilization on 5 gig. Co-channel interference. Is that also, is Coleman in the room? What's the right term for that now? Are we calling that something different? Contention. Well, like AP to AP contention is what I'm looking for, right? But yeah, intra-BSS or whatever fancy ass term you new Wi-Fi people are using. You have 40 megahertz wide channels. What else do you guys want to know? What do you want to know as a Wi-Fi technician about that? So I posited that, hey, if I want to know the AP specs and I want to know the client makeup that are connecting. For example, let's just say 95% of all clients that were connected to that radio were one-by-one, single stream devices. That's going to change your answer compared to maybe what I have up here on the screen. I say, look, your clients are a mix of 3x3 11AC, maybe some 2x2 11AC. That helps you come to an answer. Do you guys agree with these recommendations? I'm not trying to, Perry was doing the same thing to you guys. He wasn't trying to bust you guys up. He was just, is upgrading an access point, in this case, realistic? Is that something that maybe you should do? Given this scenario. Yeah, why? You have 50% of your connections are 3x3 11AC, but your access point only supports 2x2. Could upgrading the access point improve your airtime utilization, which is currently high at 75%? But only 10% of that is caused from other access points on the channel. Maybe you could add an access point and possibly reduce your channel size. These are things, any discussion there. I'm fine with it being discussion. I've got like 2 hours left, so. I think, okay, you guys, okay, you can yell at me. Okay, well, apparently everybody agrees. I do too. This, next click please, is analytics. You just did analytics based on a bunch of data, but imagine a system that does that for you. Now, one of the things that I have continually learned and believe is starting, for what has it been, 12, 13 years of actively in the Wi-Fi industry, is that there's still a desperate need for really smart Wi-Fi people. I was talking to somebody the other day. I was like, well, my son's 16. He doesn't have high aspirations for college, which I'm okay with. I'm not one of those, hey, go get $100,000 in loans. I'm not going to force him to do that. I said, look, man, if you want to learn something, You can be making great money in Wi-Fi by the time you're 21, 22 years old. You'd be a rock star if you put your, nose to the ground, grindstone, whatever the word is, and do it. But there's still a shortage. So analytics is playing a role here because I can tell you from our customer base out there is they're great people, but they're not always strong Wi-Fi people. So being able to go through this and imagine just a system just says, hey, you need to upgrade access points in these 5 areas. Here's the APs that you should upgrade. For extra credit, swap some APs. You've got some 4x4 11AC Wave 2s over here that are at 10% utilization. Just swap them. Don't spend any money, just get on a ladder, swap the APs somewhere else. Analytics can make that happen. Analytics can just literally on the screen say, this is what you should do. By the way, this is a reality today. We have everything to do exactly what I said. So on the next click, you're going to see the difference between analytics and machine learning. So analytics is using that data to do something with it. Machine learning will detect the change and evaluate if that change actually made a difference in order to learn from that. It can use that information to say, I was successful. Now let me throw something else at you to here, is that don't just think in your customer environment. Imagine being able to learn from other customers who have done this. Again, pimping Nyanza a little bit, we do this. We have a way where you can see how your network compares to everybody else in your vertical of your size. We have a feature where you can friend them and say, hey, your DNS is a rock star. What are you doing? But the advancements, beyond that are this. This customer went from 20% of their users having Wi-Fi issues to 5% of having their issues. Here was the 10 things that they did. This is going to make you successful as well. That's gold. Gold. Next slide, please. I'm not one of those really, really smart people like Chuck and Perry, and some of you remember the name Matthew Gast, these people that are really, really intense to the standards and see the future. So I look at generation 1 of analytics as maybe auto channel assignment. Think about how auto channel assignments work. It takes in information and tries to make a decision as to what's best for the network. Have those been successful? Some people would say yes, some people would say no. That's kind of a heated debate as to whether auto channel assignment is. Generation 2 is somewhere around kind of where we're at today. We're beyond that. We're using more information. We're using not only layer 3 and layer 2 information, but we're going up the stack. Is the application having a good performance? How's the WAN doing? Is the WAN affecting us? Again, it's about placing blame, but in a good way. And then generation 3 and 4, you can see that. But generation X, super future, this is where I see it going, is that eventually you remove a graphical interface. Just think about if you think about true analytics and true machine learning, and I'll talk about vendors, later in this presentation, but this is the vision you have from your vendors. The Wi-Fi vendors out here would just say, it would go something like this. Hey, I just noticed there's a bunch of users having a Wi-Fi problem. I did these 3. I went from 40 megahertz to 20 megahertz. I did some fancy crap in 11AX that I don't understand. And hey, we have a better environment now. It just tells you that. There's no interface, there's no graphical interface to show you. It just does it. Or you type in, or you just over Alexa or whatever other stuff is out there, it says, hey, how's my network today? Oh, it's doing really well. I did these 3 things and it improved. There's no graphical interface for that. That's where analytics will eventually go, but everywhere in our lives, not just in networking. Next slide, please. Think about some other bad things that can happen to Wi-Fi. So some of them are like rogue access points, co-channel interference, and then the third one I think up here is non-Wi-Fi interference. Perfect, hold on there a second. But when you look at these things, the difference between someone fairly new to Wi-Fi, and I know there's a lot of you out there, is that when I say these three things, rogue APs, co-channel interference, and non-Wi-Fi interference, if I were to ask you, are those going to negatively affect performance? What's the answer? No, go back one, sorry. No, my bad, go back one. Do those negatively affect performance? What's your answer? I hear some yeses in there. You guys are kind of a timid set of people. Listen, I'm not going to hurt you with the missile silo. They took the missile. No, I can hear you, man. But with bass. Say it back to me. It does depend. Some of you say yes. I heard a lot of yeses. The answer is it depends. The answer is we don't know. If someone tells me, and this is we have discussions like this internally at Neonsa, where I have to kind of, not with Jeff, I mean, Jeff's a CWNP sharp guy, but when I'm talking to engineers, they're like, hey, a rogue AP was in the area when this client had bad performance, and I say, I don't care. You can't blame something just because it was there. You have to actually look at the impact. Do those things significantly impact performance? That's what analytics should answer. Don't just take it at face value that just because these exist, that they're causing your problem. That's really easy. And again, my advice to those of you that are new to Wi-Fi out there, don't use it as a scapegoat, because you will. You'll have a tendency to want to do that, is to say, oh, I found a rogue AP, that was causing the issue. Rogue APs that don't have any data movement are just doing nothing. They're not hurting your network at all. They're way better than that client that's watching YouTube, or that's 11B or 11G, low-end 11N. So don't just think, okay, just because bad things exist, that it actually negatively impacts your network. Next slide. How many of you have ever heard of Microsoft Tay? Really? This is kind of fun. Nice. Jason does? Sorry? Did they kill her? Yeah, they did kill her. That is true, yes. Microsoft Tay was Microsoft's artificial intelligence engine. They put her on Twitter. The idea was to be able to have human conversations. No more clicking for a second. To have human conversations with people via Twitter. What happened was it worked really well for about an hour. Remember Godwin's law way back when? There was a reason I talked about Godwin's law. It wasn't just a lead up to the missile silo. It was because, and I have not put up the slides up here that I wanted to, because they were not good. So Microsoft Tay was learning from the internet. Just think about that just for 1 second. It was learning how to speak human by communicating with people on social media. What could possibly go wrong? Absolutely. What actually did go wrong was that Tay became a racist, sexist. I mean, it's amazing. Please don't do it now, because I like attention. Everybody knows I'm an attention whore that knows me, so please focus here. But when you get done, Google Microsoft Tay, and you will actually see what I'm talking about. So this is the nicest example I could come up with. This is Tay tweeting somebody, we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. She learned that in 20 hours. And this is the nicest thing that she said it about that 20 hours. I can't believe it took them that long to shut it down. It was quite spectacular. Next slide, please. So what is scary about that is that, and again, you guys probably, I'm saying good things about Mist. I think Mist is a great company. I actually like all Wi-Fi vendors, because I always will need another job. So I love all of you. So Tay had inputs that were probably not positive in her life. So some jackass enables 40 megahertz wide channels in 2.4. AI may learn that that's good. What if it works? 40 megahertz wide channels in 2.4 can work just perfectly in a low data rate environment. A low data movement environment, this is good. I could rant for hours on that. The reason Wi-Fi is so difficult is because you can do really stupid crap and it still works. Or you can do it perfectly and it's crap, because environments sometimes are bad. But if there's not a lot of data movement, in fact, Jeff, are you even here? Yep, okay, he's behind the screen where he's supposed to be. So Jeff and I were just talking right before the presentation. He's like, man, I was just on a review call with one of our customers, and he had to give them bad news. He said, man, they had tons of co-channel interference in 5 gig because they had 80 megahertz wide channels enabled. Now, generally speaking, 80 meg wide channels, most large enterprises is not recommended. Voyant's found that. Jeff saw that right on the screen, so he had to break it to them that their entire design was shite. But a good analytics system is going to, track that and say, hey, here's how it's gotten better. But again, the point of this is that if it works, a machine learning and analytics could actually learn that that's okay and start recommending it elsewhere. So there is a fear of slowly integrating. In fact, Bob from Mist was saying this, is that I was actually quite impressed with his speech that he said, you have to slowly move into this. You have to make very incremental steps, and we at Niantic are doing the same thing, is that you can't just all of a sudden turn on machine learning because you're going to end up with a Nazi telling you how to do Wi-Fi. That's probably not good. So the system must provide feedback loop, and this is called training. How many of you have ever heard of something called computer vision? This is super high-end tech. I know some Silicon Valley startups that are doing this. Basically, what's a good example? One of the big examples is train cars, right? Trains are going down the track. Identify if there's a person stowed on the train. Right now, humans do that. They analyze every train car, every image with a camera, and it does that. Computer vision learns what a person looks like over time and is trained. But those are all trained with human inputs that are known good. How many of you have seen the new CAPTCHA where show me the traffic lights? Have you seen that one? Show me every image that has a bicycle and a traffic light. I have a suspicion that those are actually being used to train AI. I actually do think this because I think they're actually crowdsourcing the ability to train for computer vision. We'll see if I'm right. Next slide, please. So what's the problems in getting kind of to, hopefully this vision that I've kind of told you about is kind of this kind of new generation vision of actually doing this kind of stuff. Now, I want to throw this out here is that something that Peter said was analytics are not replacing you. That's not happening. It really isn't happening. I don't want you to see this and say, oh, well, my goodness, I might as well pick up something that computers can't, or people can't do, or computers can't do. No, your job is secure for decades. Don't worry. But the problems in getting there is the whole idea behind analytics is to get the problem closer. Who did I have breakfast with this morning? I don't know if yeah, we were talking about how, using like Ekahau for packet capture and MetaGeek and all of these good tools, the idea behind a good analysis tool, whether it's within a vendor or vendor neutral like us, is to make your job more efficient. Where do you look? What channel's the problems? Where within your location is having the problems? Let's get that down there and then go forth and conquer with your handheld tools today. The problems in making all this reality, one, marketing experts. I was really only kind of kidding when I said this. You have to find good marketing people that can sell the vision. What company is selling the vision best for analytics? Anybody know? Cisco. Cisco is an amazing marketing machine. We're going to talk about them in a little bit when I actually talk about each vendor. So that's one of the problems. Click, please. And the next one is data scientists are expensive. Very expensive people. The hiring job market out there in Silicon Valley right now for people who are I don't know what data scientists do. They're not fun people. I mean, we know some. They're not super fun people. That's supposed to be funny. These two guys thought it was funny. But they're really, really smart people. And how do you take all of that data and make something useful? So for those of you that are thinking about a career change, another 10 years in college, and you're that. So click, please. So that's one of the problems, is actually just access to the right people. Access to the right data. That's some of the challenges I've seen vendors who are kind of starting now or started in the last few years of doing analytics is just, number one, getting the right data to the right places. That's why you're going to see some vendors that only certain access points will do analytics. Their new analytics is only certain APs, certain controllers. The cloud model is actually a bit It's not quite as good for the cloud management model for doing analytics because all the data, one of the advantages of a centralized controller model in this case is all the data runs through one place, is your controllers. So you have a central point of analysis. You just rack in a new controller with some new brain power, and now you can maybe do some better analytics. Where on the cloud, that may be a little more challenging. Again, like the Mists of the world kind of built it from there. And then new APs that are coming out from your cloud vendors, say like a Meraki, are likely going to be able to do this as well. Next, please. I was supposed to change the word rankings. I'm not ranking them. So this is really not rankings. This is really my thoughts on vendors. So you can click through this slide and just kind of animate this in. Thanks. I get a lot of questions. We're side by side with Mist. They ask me, are we competitors with Mist? Or a Cisco DNA or a RubenNet Insight, some of these that we'll talk about. My answer is, if Mist goes into a customer and they have, they like what they see with Wi-Fi, which they will, then maybe we're a competitor. But it's really different selling hardware versus what we do. So I don't see myself as a competitor. I see us as allies. We integrate with most major Wi-Fi vendors or have a roadmap to integrate with Wi-Fi vendors. And most of them are happy to integrate with us. There's no competitiveness there. But go ahead and click, please. Before we do this, click, because I only have 3 minutes left. I have to get through this quickly. We're going to take a quick commercial break. That commercial break is for, timing is important. One of the things I had this kind of epiphany, so I spent a whole bunch of money on a missile silo. It's real, I actually did do this. I have this about 4,000 square feet underground space that I thought 8 years ago would be really fun to do. And now I realize I spent a lot of money and I didn't really think through that. But in all seriousness, so we're thinking, hey, wouldn't it be a badass place to have training? But don't think of just Wi-Fi training or technical training, but you have training there in what I think is a pretty neat space, lots of space, it's underground. If you want to do Wi-Fi testing with no interference, I got the place for you. This thing is nuclear proof, literally. It's EMP proof, literally. The doors are 6,000 pounds. No one will hear you scream. It's a fun place. So we are actually doing this, we being my wife, my kids, so we're actually doing this. But it's going to be different. Click again, please. And it's like, what else can I do? Because I have a ton of hobbies, and I bought a crap ton of tools to do all this stuff. So imagine an experience where you come out for technical training, but maybe on your break for lunch, you build an AR-15. Some of you are not gun people, so if you're not, then that's not a gun. It's something totally different. If you are a gun person, it's fun. But just imagine doing things that maybe a lot of people don't do. How many of you have ever welded before? Maybe 20% if I had to guess. Yeah, probably 20%. Learn to fly a drone. I just mean flying it like in your house and hitting stuff, but actually learning Part 107 of the FAA. Operating an excavator. That's at the time, my 8-year-old daughter is operating it. I said, use 2 controls to start using it, and she started doing it because children are smart like that. That's my son he's cutting his name in a plasma cutter. So the idea is to have a whole bunch of fun things to do and to learn that are the opposite of technical. As a trainer myself, it's like, look, technical after a while is just terrible. Switch that and use a different part of the brain. So that's my vision. My other vision is to bring in world-class trainers. I've talked to Keith and Devin and Robert. I haven't talked to Blake yet. Blake, you're welcome. You may have to get dirty. I don't know if he's in here. Who else? So Peter McKenzie to come in and do Wi-Fi training in a place that's, you got to go somewhere to do it. So you might as well do it somewhere pretty neat. That's the thought. That's my sales pitch. Next 2 slides. So my thoughts on the analytics. Again, this is not ranked, by the way. Mist is first because Mist has spent the time to do this. I think they've done a good job with analytics. If I were to do the analyst side, is that there's a lot more than just Wi-Fi analytics to analytics. Again, we look at NetFlow and the wire and WAN, other sites, upstream. You have to look at a lot of stuff, but I think from a Wi-Fi vendor perspective, they're on the right track. Next, Aruba. Aruba has acquired a few companies, Cape and Rasa come to mind, but they're definitely on the heels of, hey, we have this thing called Net Insight. They've renamed it a few times, but that's the goal, that's the vision that they have. Cisco, I think, has the more ambitious plan than maybe everybody because they have more of the infrastructure, but the more ambition means more time. So I know some customers that have tried it. It's not quite there yet. But again, if you look at the vision, that's why I talk about the marketing. They'd have a great marketing vision for the product. Again, what we see at Niantic is we have customers that have free access to DNA as a trial, and we see them kind of holding off on that decision for now. And then last up here, you take the Aerohive, the Meraki's, the Ruckus, and I know I'm missing other vendors like Extreme and Mojo. But I reached out to these companies, and they're like, look, we're not going to give you our roadmap because you're kind of a competitor, but also want to partner. It's kind of weird. But they're working on it. And I believe them. I mean, I've seen some stuff that I can't publicly say or whatever, but they're working on it because it's important. But the takeaway that I have, I think, hold on, there's one more slide before I go. Who drove here? Okay, who drove here? Sir in the red, what's your name? Yes. Orange? You know there's lights in my eyes, right? You drove from LA. Okay, there's a TV back there that you can have at the end of the show, because we can't take it with us, so. That doesn't help. All right, that guy's really ambitious. You get a TV. It's not huge, but we'll give you that TV when we leave. But again, my takeaway for all of this is, look for this to be the new forefront, the new war. This is where vendors are really spending their time. You're going to see some awesome things coming out. Thank you very much. Love you guys. Have a good break.